Welcome back to The Explainer. So I want you to imagine something for a second. Imagine a massive global tech giant suddenly getting kicked out of the two biggest, most exclusive software clubs on the planet. I mean, literally locked out. No Android, no Windows. Both doors just slammed right in their face in the exact same time frame. Honestly, most companies, they would have folded right then and there, just instantly destroyed by the sheer gravity of being cut off from the entire global tech ecosystem. But instead, this company did something totally unprecedented. They just went ahead and built their very own operating system from absolute scratch.
Yep, you guessed it, that company is Huawei. Let's rewind to May of 2019. The US government made this incredibly sweeping policy decision, placing Huawei on what's called the Entity List. Now, if you're not familiar, think of the Entity List as basically a massive economic blacklist. In plain terms, it meant American companies couldn't sell their tech to Huawei anymore. At least not without special government permission. So virtually overnight, Google had to cut them off from Google mobile services. And that is a huge deal, because that's the invisible engine running stuff we use every day, like the Play Store, Gmail, and Google Maps. And right at the exact same time, a slower squeeze started happening on the computer side, severely restricting Huawei's access to Windows, as well as the Intel and AMD chips you actually need to run it.
When you look at the timeline, the chronological shock of this whole ban is just staggering. On one side, you have this literal overnight political decision coming out of Washington. And on the other side, you have Huawei's incredibly patient 5-year top-secret engineering response. Can you imagine the sheer panic and chaos inside Huawei's headquarters during those first few months of 2019? You've got engineers and executives scrambling, realizing almost instantly that, wow, this isn't just a temporary storm we can wait out. This is a permanent shift in geopolitics. So, a mere 3 months after the ban hit, they announced Harmony OS. And now jumping all the way ahead to 2024, we're seeing the release of Harmony OS next, which is really the culmination of this massive, quiet rebuild. Okay, let's really dive into this, because this ban forced a fundamental pivot in our story. See, the old reality for China's tech industry was this complete, total dependence on operating systems that they frankly didn't own and couldn't control. I mean, one single policy decision in Washington could basically break a decades-old business. So Huawei, obviously backed by a very watchful Chinese government, decided they had to forge an entirely new reality. Chinese state media actually calls this being self-controllable. Basically, that means owning every single layer of your technology stack, from top to bottom. And by the time we hit 2024, being self-controllable meant launching an operating system with exactly 0 Android open source code. 0.
Now look, getting to that point was not easy, and it certainly wasn't pretty at first. Early on, critics were absolutely laughing at the very first version of Harmony OS. Software experts would poke around the code, and they kept finding standard Android error messages popping up under the hood. It was clearly still quietly running on Google's Android Foundation. So, people called it a cheap rebrand, they called it a desperate political stunt, but what they totally missed was that this first version, it was never meant to be the finished product. It was a bridge, and bridges are built to lead somewhere, right? It was just a placeholder to keep things running while the real system was being built in secret.
And as we know now, that bridge led directly to the Harmony OS Next ecosystem. By 2024, Huawei dropped all that leftover Android code and launched a fully separate system built completely from the ground up. And it's designed to run on everything: phones, tablets, laptops, smartwatches, even cars and smart home devices, all of them acting as one unified connected system. Now, just to put that into perspective, connecting a car to a smartwatch without a glitch is an absolute engineering nightmare. Just think about the latency requirements, the entirely different chip architectures, the real-time processing needs. It's wild. It's actually very similar to what Apple does with its seamless ecosystem, but here's the kicker. Huawei is attempting it on a massive national scale across drastically different product lines.
But the most fascinating number in this entire story actually isn't about phones at all. It's the number 40. And this is right where our story pivots into entirely new uncharted territory. Because for nearly 40 years, Windows has ruled personal computers and laptops without anyone seriously challenging it. It is, quite literally, the default language of global business and personal computing. But get this, the very system Huawei built to survive without Android on phones has turned out to be flexible enough to scale up, and now it is stepping directly into Microsoft's territory.
And this brilliantly illustrates what is truly at stake here. 1 billion. China is the largest personal computer market in the entire world, representing over 1 billion potential captive users. For decades, almost all those machines have run on Windows. And look, we all know the absolute pain of a forced Windows update hitting right when you're trying to save a document, right? But for Chinese regulators, a system where updates, licensing, and support are entirely controlled by a company in Washington state, that is viewed as a massive national security liability.
So Huawei has this absolutely massive built-in audience that is ready and highly motivated to switch.
So how do you actually go about overthrowing a 40-year monopoly? Well, you definitely don't do it with some flashy consumer launch event. Huawei's calculated PC strategy is much more like a slow, deliberate siege. Step 1. Target the government replacement cycle. You win procurement contracts office by office, city by city. Step 2. You take that massive captive domestic market and use it to force developers to build a native app ecosystem. Honestly, developers just can't ignore a market that large. And finally, step 3. Once your foundation is completely unshakable at home, that's when you expand globally.
Just pause for a second and really think about the sheer scale of this challenge. The source material uses this fantastic analogy, and it really hits the nail on the head. It's like trying to build an entirely new car market, complete with repair shops, spare parts, and trained mechanics, all within a handful of years, simply because you woke up and decided you no longer wanted to depend on someone else's engine. Imagine trying to open a new dealership, but then realizing you also have to pave the roads, refine your own oil, and teach everyone how to drive. Except here, the product is invisible software. It literally requires rewriting banking software, hospital records, and complex government workflows that have relied on Windows for decades.
And all of this is building into a literal perfect storm for Microsoft. You have two immense pressures colliding right now. Pressure 1, Windows 10 support is naturally winding down. If you've ever worked in an office, you know that an operating system reaching end of life is a massive, expensive headache for IT departments everywhere, basically forcing a wave of global businesses into an inevitable upgrade cycle. And then there's pressure 2. Beijing is actively encouraging state offices and banks to treat this exact upgrade moment as the perfect excuse to dump foreign software and adopt homegrown alternatives. I mean, the timing lines up absolutely flawlessly with Huawei's 5-year rebuild.
But here is the global twist that most people are completely missing. This is no longer just a Chinese story. Huawei isn't just selling Harmony OS inside its home borders anymore. They're actively pushing this operating system as a blueprint for global software independence. They're out there marketing this to the rest of the world as the ultimate insurance policy. It's a way to completely circumvent Western tech monopolies and ensure that your country's digital infrastructure can never, ever be shut down by foreign policy decisions made thousands of miles away.
So, how are they doing it? Well, Huawei is actively leveraging a massive, pre-existing advantage to expand into Southeast Asia, the Middle East, Africa, and Latin America. In these regions, Huawei already has a decades-long foothold building the actual physical telecom and internet network towers. So their sales pitch is incredibly simple and highly effective. If a government already relies on Huawei to keep its internet running, there is very little friction in swapping their office computers over to that exact same company's software, especially when it's significantly cheaper than the American alternatives.
Huawei is pitching something we've really never seen before. They are selling insurance against ever being cut off. And looking at it impartially, the 2019 US restrictions inadvertently created this massive, highly lucrative selling point for them. While I can literally walk into government offices in emerging markets that might be, extremely sensitive to outside diplomatic pressure, and offer them a complete technology stack that is mathematically immune to Western sanctions. And why is it immune? Because Huawei already lived through those exact sanctions and explicitly built this entire system just to survive them.
The end result of all this is a complete sanctions-proof blueprint. You've got an independent chip supply, an independent phone system, and now an independent computer system. Honestly, it is the ultimate irony of this entire saga. The very restrictions that were explicitly designed to weaken and isolate Huawei ended up forcing them to forge a complete, independent blueprint for global technological survival. Every single restriction just became one more reason for other nations to seriously consider hedging against their dependence on Western tech.
Which leaves us with this final, incredibly provocative question. Now, Microsoft hasn't lost the globe yet, not by a long shot. Windows still runs the vast majority of the world's computers. But what happens to the world's technology decisions now that a proven, fully independent, sanctions-proof alternative is just sitting right there on the shelf, ready for purchase? I really want to hear your analysis on this. Will this new alternative finally break that 40-year grip, or is the Windows moat just way too deep? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and hey, thank you so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep learning, and I'll see you next time.